Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back, everyone. How's everyone doing? Again, long time no see. It's been 5 minutes since we have met. Welcome to the part four, which is the last part of our interview question, like JavaScript React interview question sessions. Uh, yeah, uh, if you are joining me for the very first time, I have sent in the check-in link. Please, please, please do check in. Helps you, helps me, helps MLH. If you are more of a QR code person, it should be visible somewhere on top. Okay. Uh, yeah. And if you are again joining me for the very first time, let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Utkarsh, but I prefer to go by UT. And we have been doing these like understanding React and JavaScript, but more from an interview perspective. So, like, given this like XYZ question in an interview, how would you kind of solve it? How do you understand what's going on? Uh, yeah, so on and so forth. Right before the session, I'd pushed some of the questions, and now we continue back. And if you want a link to the GitHub repository where all the questions are, then here you go. It's in the chat. So GitHub link there, check-in link there, check-in QR code is there, and let's get started. So, before we went on the break, on the quick break, I had said that we have two more questions here. So, question number six, given this interview question, and it is specifically in TXT file because otherwise Linter starts complaining and you know what's wrong. But assuming you get something like this, some question like this, uh, can you figure out what's wrong in this? Okay. Let's try doing it together. Okay. So, importing, yes, that's fine. We have two state variables here. The first is to set the name, which initially is empty. And then I have this show extra and set show extra state, which is initially false. Okay. Let's go to the component first because, well, the if condition cannot be hit until it is true the right. So if show extra, which means if show extra is true, that's when we do all of this. But currently it is false, so we will not reach this part of code yet. So what we will see actually is just this bit. Okay, the whatever is rendered. So there is an input box that is rendered which sets the name, and there is a button which on click is going to change the set show extra from false to true. Okay, because there is a not operator used, which means it changes it from like false to true or true to false depending on like what's going on. Cool. And yeah, we click on that button. Now, any problems that you see in this code? I guess that's the question. Let's try and follow this through. So on the initial render, everything should be fine. No changes whatsoever. Nothing should break. Then I actually click on the button toggle extra. which means it should be changed from false to true. So this use state variable, set show extra, is going to change it from false to true, which means show extra becomes true. If it becomes true, we will go inside this if condition. Now inside this if condition, what's happening? We have a const extra and set extra, and that is setting the value, like initializing it with empty, and it is just doing nothing. Okay, so on first glance it looks like actually it should be fine, right? We're not doing anything. uh, we are using void, which means ignore it. Okay, literally it means just ignore anything and everything. But nothing should go wrong, possibly, right? Anyone want to take a quick guess or agree or disagree with me? I'll give you like, let's say, 30 seconds if anyone is interested to agree or disagree with what I said. Like nothing should go wrong ideally. On the first load, everything should be fine. Even when we click on this, it will say, oh yeah, it updates to true, which means it will go inside this condition, but we're not doing any it checks in the condition. Extra is not called anywhere. Set extra is not called anywhere. Okay. And if you like if I double click on it, as you can see, nothing happens. I can, if you want, I can change it to const inside and set inside. And we can just say inside and oops, set inside. Now, definitely, if I search, double click on it, there are only these two references. Okay, nothing in chat. So let's understand what's going to happen. So you might have seen these errors, but now this is the time where you understand what is happening. This will fail. Okay, and it will fail because we are violating the rule of hooks. And it would either say that like not either, it will mostly like 99% it will say that it rendered more hooks than during the previous render. Okay, and what does that mean? In the previous render, in the first render, React knew about two use states, but on the like on the next render, on the toggle extra click, it now knows that there is a third hook. Okay, and if React doesn't know about it beforehand, okay, if React doesn't know about it beforehand, then it is going to be confused, or it kind of breaks it, because React is like, wait, this new hook that has been suddenly created with some value, did it depend on any previous prop? Will I have to recalculate every other prop that was there? Will I have to ignore all the previous values? Should I start with a new value? Like, what's going on? And that is why uh, React would kind of go into this whole re-render. Oh, I don't know. Do I really need to re-render? Not re-render. What's going to happen? New values have come in which I have no idea about. Crash. So this is React actually helping us by saying that do not call hooks conditionally, because if I don't know about it in the initial render, I'm possibly going to just crash. And we can actually check it out. Uh, it was question 6. Okay, I've typed GHW, no problems whatsoever. Click on toggle extra, and there we go. Okay, so previous render, there was use state undefined. In the next render, we had use state. So it rendered more hooks than during the previous render, and now it doesn't know. Like what React actually does, that internally it is going to store a ordered list. So on every render, it is going to go through the hooks in that exact order. So there is an order. You might sometimes see that actually being logged on the console Like sometimes if something else breaks, it goes like we render in this particular order always. Okay. So React is expecting on the first render, it is expecting that there are two hooks, two use states. So it goes like, I need to update the first one, I need to update the second one, I need to batch them and update the DOM. But now, after that click of the button, React has now three hooks. So React can't figure out which hook maps to which state. Okay. It's not like the hooks are named by anything or named, or there is a label or a value to indicate that the first use state is this, the second use state is this. All it does is literally just an ordered list of, this is the first one, this is the second one, this is in an array. Okay, it's like first element, second element, third element. So every use state is element 1, element 2, element 3. It's not like it's an object of element 1 and name, I don't know, what was it? Name. Element 2 and name show extra. Element 3 and name inside. It doesn't do that. Okay. It's like, yeah, I have three things in an array, or two things in an array in this case. And then we clicked on the button and it goes like, now I have three things in the array and I'm not sure about it. Why do I need three things in the array? And it breaks. So ESLint in our case actually tells us that, oh, don't do this. You're calling hooks conditionally. Okay. And you will trigger an infinite re-render at some point. So yeah, this is the question. This is the solution. This is the reason, and I hope you understand what's happening in this case. Okay, more hooks, and React is not able to map which state points to which value updates. I will send this back to TXT. Otherwise, well, it's not an interview question anymore, right? And one more before I change in this one. Inside and set inside. Fine. Okay. So this is the question. So there's a use state, there's a function called as child, which has child rendered, and we have a return. Okay. So that is our first component, child component. Then we have this parent component, in that we have again count and set count. You must think that I really love counting. I have a button which updates the count, and there's the child component which is like right below. Some label has been assigned, it doesn't matter. Now the question I have is, actually in this case let me just add question 6. Is there anything wrong with this component? Question 7 is, does child re-render, just child get rendered, does child get rendered when parent state changes if the props are the same? Okay, so there is no key prop being passed to child. Okay, I'll focus on that. There's no key prop being passed to child. There is just one prop which is label, which is fixed. It's not changing. The question is, will this child be rendered again and again? Basically, this child rendered, will this be printed again and again every time I click on the button and the count is updated? Yes or no? Any guesses before I reveal the answer? I'll give you like 60 seconds. Meanwhile, let me look if there are any questions from anyone. Doesn't look like. Everyone must be understanding everything that I say. This is really good to know. I'll not deny that. Get rendered. Okay, no answer. Uh, let's try it out and then we can actually understand it, right? So Q7. Okay, every time I click on the button, will I see child rendered? Yes or no? That was the question. Let's check. Uh, fixed is just this child component, right? Okay. Child rendered on the first one because, well, this is the mount phase and of course it has to render. Also, I'll remove the QR code. Hopefully, everyone has checked in. Okay. I click on the parent count, which increments it by one, and it actually prints out child rendered. Let's try again. Child rendered. Shall I add Q7 rendered as well? On first load, of course, Q7 rendered, child rendered. Click on it, Q7 rendered, child rendered, Q7 rendered, child rendered. So on every change, even though not the prop is fixed, the prop value is not changing. There is no key prop that's being passed to kind of tell to update or refresh or anything. It is getting rendered again and again and again. And yes, even though label prop doesn't change, it gets re-rendered every time. And this is one of the most misunderstood aspects of React, in my opinion. Okay. Whenever a parent component renders, the child will re-render by default, unless you have done something. Uh, child will always re-render. Why? Because React doesn't really know in advance if the child output would differ after the parent re-renders. Like, what if child is reading from a ref? Okay, it's using a use ref to listen to what is, I don't know what's the value of the button component. Okay, React doesn't know that. React doesn't know like if it has any use effect in it, which is depending on some other value which is coming from somewhere else. Maybe the child component is waiting for some uh, API response. Okay, React doesn't know that in advance. So the safest default way is to re-render all child component whenever the parent changes. Okay, so it's not cheap to know. Basically, let's think of it from that perspective, that it is not cheap to know in advance if the props, like if the child component will change if the parent is changing. But there are ways to kind of avoid re-rendering a child component if you are, when you're writing the code, you're 100% sure that the change in the count of parent should not make any difference to the child component. Okay, and theoretically, or like let's say in terms of JavaScript, if you have to think, not in terms of React, in terms of JavaScript, think of it like, if I don't want the child component to change because I know that the props are not going to change, I should basically tell React that just compare the props. Okay, if after comparison of props you are 100% like, and no, not you are 100% sure, but more like after comparison of props you see nothing has changed, in that case don't re-render the child component, right? And the way to achieve it in React is by using memoization. So we are going to use memoize child, not child. Memoize child. So if you have not used it before, so memo is a higher order component. Okay, what is a higher order component? Higher order component means something that wraps another component. Okay, so you can say like react.memo or just the word memo. So these tell React that, hey, if you are like, if a child function or component is wrapped in a memo, then before you actually make any updates in the DOM, in your three phases. Remember, trigger phase, render phase, commit phase. So trigger phase is the state update. Yes, go and check everything that needs to be updated. Then in the render phase, compare the props. Okay, and if you see that nothing, if the props have not changed, then React will anyways skip updating the DOM. But it will only know that if you have told React to actually go and check for the props. Okay, if you have not, then no. React is by default going to render all the child components. That is very important to know. So how would you, let's say, write a memo here? So I'm trying to make minimal number of changes. Hmm. And I can now call memoized child. This can take a label as well. And I can say memoized fixed. Okay. So I've literally copied this whole function, just wrapped it inside this memo. And I'm just going to make the console log to be slightly different so that you can actually see it changing, or can you, so that you can make a differentiation between a non-memoized child versus a memoized child. So going to do a refresh, q7 rendered, child rendered, memoized child rendered. First render, everything, all the props are kind of new, right? Now I click on parent count and I update it from 0 to 1. Q7 rendered, which is my parent, child rendered, but memoized child did not render. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, there we go. We have avoided expensive computation just by being smart about what needs to render or re-render, because we know that, okay, in this case, the prop is not going to change. So it's okay. Uh, if you want to force a re-render, do you think, now my follow-up question is, if I give it a key prop, do you think this will force it to re-render every time? This follows back to one of the previous questions that we had done about the key prop. It's like a callback. Yes, no, maybe, maybe not. Don't care, don't know. Okay, let's see. Let's try it out. So I've now passed in a key prop and I click on this. Now we are literally telling React that actually every time it's a new component, because a key prop basically tells it that, hey, we use key prop to reset state without using use effect, right? That was what we had discussed. And we had also discussed that by using key prop, we are telling React to kind of discard all the props and all the values of the previous version and recreate this from scratch. So we have literally kind of broken use memo to be back to a normal child component. Okay. So if you pass a key prop, memo is not going to help you. Okay. So that is also one of the learnings in this case. So now my question is to myself, how should I put this? I guess I can just do an answer. Yes, because by default, React will re-render all child components if parent re-renders. But we can avoid it by wrapping the child component in memo, in react.memo. And I'm going to cut this out. I'm going to paste it here and I am going to take this out, paste it, and use as I don't need this. Okay, so I guess that is it. So we have reached Q7, and I am glad. Actually, I'll update the previous one, and I am going to just say session 3v2. What was I writing before? Did my commit messages have? Okay. React renders, state snapshots, and memo, and git push. Perfect. Now let's go to the next set of questions. Any concerns, anyone, with respect to everything that we have done? Did it make sense? Did it not make sense? Because now we are going to go towards building some stuff. Okay. So we're going to write code about building custom hooks. The assumption is that you know what are hooks already. Like, let's say you are in an interview and you are asked to build, let's say, a use debounce hook, a use local storage hook, a use fetch hook, and then we can discuss if there is some other custom hook that you know of and want to build. Okay, so we'll do it like planning it out. We'll have a Q&A before we build it. Okay, nothing from anyone, so I'm going to assume that everyone has zero problems, like zero concerns. Let's go ahead. So imagine you are in an interview and you have been asked to build a use debounce hook. So I guess the first question that I'm going to ask is, what are we debouncing? Are we debouncing API requests, or are we debouncing some input state like user input? Okay, that would be my first question. So let's say question 8, build a use debounce hook. So first, are we debouncing input state or API calls? Okay, that would be my first question. Let's say the answer is we're debouncing input. Or let's say API call. That would be better, right? API call. So I'm going to kind of show what the hook would look like. Now, for folks, if you are like confused between use debounce, and you might have heard of something called as throttling. So debouncing versus throttling. So debouncing is basically to wait until some time. So let's say user is typing in an input box. So we are going to wait until the user stops doing something for, let's say, 300 milliseconds or X milliseconds, and then we are going to act on whatever we want. Okay. So example, if the user is searching in a search box, on every input, every text that they type, we don't want to fire an API call, because it is wasteful, it can cause race conditions, it can lead to us overloading the server and breaking the whole server. So we want to wait until the user has paused. Okay. So after the user has paused, then we'll wait for 300 milliseconds and we'll be like, okay, we are happy that uh, the user has stopped typing, and now we want to send a request to API. So let's build it out. So yesterday we actually built something like this in pure JavaScript. Let's see how we would build it in React. So I'm going to call it function use debounce, because why not? Okay. This is TypeScript. I am going to say that it is going to be generic function, and the value would be generic. So it could be a string, it could be a number, it could be an API call, anything. And we need it to have some delay, which would definitely be a number. Okay. Now I can create a state variable. That's how I would go about it. So I will say debounced value, comma set debounced value, debounced. And I'm going to say use state of the value, whatever is the input. So what am I doing here? Hmm. So what am I doing here? I have created a state variable to keep track of whatever, like to keep track of the input value, for example. Now I can simply use effect, and because we need to wait for a certain amount of time, we'll use set timeout. So we did this exactly yesterday. So we'll have, let's say, const timer equals to set timeout. I'm going to say that, okay, callback function, which says that we'll call the set debounced value. Okay, so we are going to set the value. So example, let's say it's an input, right? So I type A, and that is the value that gets passed to, let's say, this input. And I'm like, I'm going to set it to A after some time, and that some time is delay. So after 300 milliseconds, I will set the state variable to be A. And now I'm going to say, just we'll also run a cleanup function. We actually discussed in detail about cleanup functions in our V1 version of these sessions, so I'm not going to do that again. And other thing that I'm going to say is that this depends on value and the delay variables. So if either of these variables change, I want you to recalculate or re-trigger or restart this use effect. And finally, we are going to return the debounced value back. Okay. The keyword T basically means generic. Okay. Or it denotes generic input, which could be a number, or it could be a function, it could be a string, it could be a boolean, anything. And this is Q8. So I'm going to do export default Q8, export default function. Forgot the keyword function. Okay. Now this is fake technically. So let's say const query comma set query equals use state of empty, const debounced query equals to use debounce of whatever is the query and some time. So I'm going to say, let's say 750 milliseconds. Okay. So delay is always, like, to set timeout, this value is always in milliseconds. Okay. So I'm saying, like, after 750 milliseconds, we want to trigger it. Now I'm going to have a use effect, because why not? if debounced query, like if some there is some value. In this case, we are going to say console.log. Uh, mm, 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 I'll just going to say fetching data after. Hmm. And this depends on every time the debounced query changes. And finally, let's just print it out. So let's say I have an input, which is of course of type text, and I'm going to say it has a value which is equal to the query. On change, all I want to do is take the event and call the set query to be equal to e dot target dot value. Okay, which means whatever is the input that the user has typed, that's it. And we need a p tag. Oops, p tag. I'm going to say this is the raw value, which is equal to actually the query, and we'll have the debounced value, which would actually be equal to the debounced query. And that's it. I think this should work out. Let's try it out. If I call Q8 here, go back to our running. So raw empty, debounced value is empty. I type ABCD, ABCS, and raw. Did you see when that is changing and versus when the debounce is changing? There is a significant gap in between. If you want, we can also console log it. Hmm. The bounced value is empty currently, A, B, C, D, and there you go. There's the difference. Okay. So between these two, we should have approximately 750 millisecond difference. Okay. There is always some slip up because timing. Oh, it's a very big discussion that we can have about timings and hardware timings, hardware clocks. So there's always some slip up, which could be like, I don't know, at some microsecond slip up. But overall, I think this would still be like what, 750. So let's start again. I just type one. Between these two, there would be a 750 millisecond gap. What if I increase this to 1500? That would show you a proper 1 second and something gap. Okay. Type one, and there we go. The difference between these two. So that's it. That's how you could create a use debounce hook. Very simple. And it is a proper production hook, actually, minus the console logs. So if you remove it, that would be better. Uh, yeah, that's it. Any questions, anyone, about the use debounce hook on how to create one, what it is doing, how it is working? We actually saw what it is doing. Okay. Okay, no questions. Moving on to the next one. Uh, Next one is, what if like you're given a question that I want you to build a use local storage hook. Okay. Now, use local storage hook. The questions that you can and will ask or should ask. So, step one, do you want it to run on the first load? Yes or no? Well, ideally, yes, right? like on the first load when the component renders, do you want it to run or no? So on mount, if we want it to run once, so in this case, I'm going to use in my use state. You remember in the previous session we talked about, do we want to recompute it every time or only on the first render? So depending on this question, do we want to recompute or reread from local storage every time or only during first render? It will make a difference on uh, how we call this function. Okay, and this is important to know because local storage.get item is synchronous. Okay, which means the main thread will be blocked and until we have read the value. Okay, so on every re-render, do we want to read a value or no? That makes a difference in terms of how we design this hook. Second is that like, now this is not a question that you would ask the interviewer, but it would be something that you should know, that local storage.get item, local storage.set item works flawlessly in Chrome, but depending on like what browser you're using, whether you're in incognito mode, non-incognito mode, uh, and like a ton of other implementation details, or if you don't have any storage space left, you might see local storage or .get item or local storage.set item crash. You could also have like, because you read string values technically, but you can save objects in local storage as a string. So json.stringify, json.parse would be our best friends. But if we have corrupted data, okay, which cannot be parsed by json.parse, then also we'll see a crash. So we have to ensure that this local storage hook does not crash. Okay, if there is a crash, in that case we don't want it to return undefined. Uh, or maybe this is the question that you'd ask the interviewer, that okay, if there is a crash for whatever reason, what do you want me to return? Do you want me to throw an error? Do you want me to return the initial value? Do you want me to do something else? Okay, so I guess these are the three questions that you can ask the interviewer, and based on the response, three questions, two questions, and one already known fact. Based on these three things, we'll have to make a decision on how we want to do this local storage hook. Okay, let me see the time. Hmm. Actually, I will leave this be. Okay, yeah, I'll leave this be for the time being. I would prefer to see any PR request that would come in where you have tried to build it on your own. Okay, based on everything that we have learned. It doesn't have to be TypeScript. You can do pure JavaScript if you want, so that you don't have to do use the generics like T or K or V or anything like that. Just use pure JavaScript to create this, like not pure JavaScript, but more like JSX rather than TSX. So use React and build this hook. I would love to see a PR for it. Okay, specifically because if I build it out, it doesn't make sense for you to learn. But like, imagine you are in an interview and you have to build this. We have discussed every question that you could ask, right? Okay, and that's it. Uh, let's go over to the next one. So let me add those questions. This is Q9, build a local storage hook. So in this case, the question is, do we need to read from local storage on every render or just once? answer would be on mount. Okay. The second thing is uh, if the use local storage hook crashes because JSON.parse failed, or there's not enough data, there's not enough space to save data in local storage, because like in local storage you can only save what, 5 MB I think. So it's possible like that 5 MB is full, right? So in that case, then what should it return? And the answer, let's say you get, is return previous value slash initial value. Okay. So actually the zeroth question in this case is, does it only read from local storage or write to it as well? Which might sound like a stupid question, but it's better to get it cleared before you go into the details of, oh, I want to write, I want to read. Answer: read and write. Never presume anything. So that is a zero. Actually, first question, second question, third question. What else? And this would be the trickier bit, okay, to implement. But I would love to see any PRs that come in about implementing this. So I'm not sure if we ever discussed it in any of the previous sessions, but in like you can check MDN docs, local storage, same tab update. Hmm. There is a problem, not a problem, but an implementation detail, that if this tab, okay, so example, this session 4 tab, if this is the one setting the value, then it cannot actually immediately read that value. If there is another tab of the same URL open, I change value here, it will be reflected here. But if I change value on this one and I want to immediately read it, I won't be able to. It will, or more like it will not be reflected here. Okay. And you can find the details here. So it says that it the storage event of the window interface fires when another document that shares the same storage area, example local storage in our case, as the current window updates that storage area. The event is not fired on the window that made the change. An event in this case is any sort of updates. Okay. So let's say I'm listening for some sort of update, then the window that has made the update will not will not know that it has made the update, or it will not be able to read that update. The other tab, which is like kind of listening to the same storage area, it will know. Okay. So do we need same tab to know about the update? Answer: yes. And here you go, the documentation link from JavaScript perspective. Now, when you build it from React perspective, do you need to care about this? Do you not need to care about this? That depends. Okay, that definitely depends. I think I should be able to prove it if I do this. And now I do JSON dot stringify sample list, and also in this case I do, so in both these tabs I'm doing this, and now I do sample list. This is the key, and the value is actually hello, and I can do local storage dot set item. Oh, wrong thing. Key is sample list, value is this hello thing. I hit enter. I can see hello printed on this tab, even though it was sent from this tab. It is not printed here. So this is the tab that set the value. Okay. And this is the tab that actually was listening to any storage changes, and it read the value. But the tab that actually set the value did not know about it. Let's do it the other way around. So I'm going to set the item for the same key, and I'm going to set it to GHW. Okay. And as proof of what it is currently, it is hello. I go back here and I want to set it to GHW. I hit enter. This is the one that set it. I go into application tab. It is set to GHW. Here it is GHW, and it knows about it. Okay. What if I manually change it? Do you think that that would trigger it? So if I change it to MLH at this point by going into application tab and hitting enter, this knows about it, and this knows about it, because that is a manual update based on not programmatic. But when you're writing code, you would be doing a programmatic update. Okay. So in this case, the tab that sets the value does not actually know about it. But anyone who's listening to it actually know about it. So I guess, and that is why this question: do we need the same tab which is setting the value know about the update and display it? The answer is yes. So now, based on these questions, okay, and all the response that you have got from an interviewer, I would love to see if someone actually builds it. Uh, I tried sending this whole message in the chat and it did not go well. So yeah, we'll leave it at this point. Let's go to the next question. Okay, and the reason why I'm not building it, because I'd love to see a PR, as I said, to do this. Uh, and this is interview style. So assuming you are in an interview and you have to build this. Okay, so question 10 is build use fetch with race safety. Okay. Okay. Better phrased. So now the ask is that user types fast, okay, and old requests are still in flight. Okay. So let's say question is user types fast, but the response is old data. Because previous data is returned late. We need a hook which fixes it. Hmm. Okay. Now, anyone in the chat wants to kind of take a stab at some questions that you would want to ask the interviewer? Anything? I guess the first question is, are we talking about API requests? Okay. The first question I would ask is, so which would be, if given this particular question, then I guess the first question would be, is this API requests? And the answer would be yes. User types fast, but the response is old data because previous data is returned late. We So user types fast and new API requests are sent, but the response is old data because previous data is returned late. We need a hook which avoids this. Okay. Then maybe the second question I might have is, hmm, do we need to save this somewhere? Okay. Do we need to save the data anywhere? Now, why this question? Because it makes it easier to kind of track some variable. Answer is no. Okay, just display on the UI. Okay, then I guess the third question would be, is there a user action to cancel the request? Answer is yes. User is typing, or maybe let's say user is switching tabs. Okay, so there is an action. So let's say you are like the user is on tab 1 and they type something, they hit enter, or yeah, they hit enter, and after that the user switches to tab 2 and then they come back to tab 1, or maybe let's say they switch to tab 2 which is using the same component for whatever reason, and it shows the data based on the input that they typed in tab 1. Okay, so yeah, that could be the scenario, that would be the scenario that I am proposing here. So the question is that, do you have like, how would you build it out? Okay, based on these requirements, how would you build it out? And let's discuss. uh, so I guess one hint that I would give you is using abort controller. Okay, so abort controller is something which JavaScript gives you. Let me find a documentation around it. Yep, there we go. So you can actually cancel any in-flight request using abort controller. The link, the MDN link is in the chat. So in the case, whenever you're building it, maybe you could try and see that, oh, can I use like abort controller and ensure that it is based up on some variable or value change. So if one of the state variable changes or some input changes, in that case, I want to abort the previous request. Okay, discard the response even if it comes back. So I would give you that hint, like if when you're building it. The other way I would say is, instead of using a bot controller, you can just have your own flag of, let's call it cancel request. Okay, so let's say user types something, hits enter, and you pass that input to the hook. The hook starts to fetch it, and then the user actually changes the tab. On tab change, you can pass another value saying this is the new value of the tab or some new ID. In that case, You can have a flag, let's call it a cancel API request, which initially is false, but because of this tab change, a new value has come in and you want to change it to true. So as soon as you set it to true, you want to ensure, like, use effect will of course depend on uh, some sort of, what's the word, some sort of dependency array, and you can have a dependency on this variable, and you can say like the input variable that has changed. Okay, so you can say, oh, the input variable has changed, let me set the previous API request to true, like cancel API request variable to true, and now we need to restart fetching. Okay, so that could be like one other way. You can use a bot controller, or you can use a cancel API request flag, cancel flag. Okay, those are two ways. Yeah, I guess that is it for 8, 9, and 10. We did build one, and I gave you like Q&A based on what I need, what you could build for 9 and 10. Would love to see, as I said, I keep saying, any PR requests that come in to build this. I would love to approve it and merge it. And some custom hook. So now this is more of an open-ended question for you all. If there is some custom hook that you would like to build, what would it be? And what is the requirement? Okay, so I'm going to say it. If there's a custom hook you want to build, what would it be? Explain the requirements and provide solution, of course. Now, of course, we are not the first people to actually think of hooks. Okay, some useful hooks that could be reused multiple times. So there is a website called as uihooks.com, which has a lot of hooks. Example, use debounce, right? So it has some useful, reusable hooks. So if I sort by name, there is a use battery, which tells you about the user's battery, which actually for me is 100%, which is true, and it is charging. Okay. Then there is use click away, detects click outside of a specific component. There is use continuous retry to what automatically retries callback function until it succeeds. Okay. Use copy to clipboard to copy data to clipboard. Maybe this one is using it. There we go. Copied. Okay. So hook to do that. This is an example of how to use the hook. I guess my question to you would be, how would you build this hook? Okay. And a lot more. So there's this one website. The other website that I have seen slash have used is more specific to TypeScript. Uh, so this was the first one, and this is the second one. Use hooks TS. You can check the documentation of it. I don't know if how frequently this gets updated. Okay, it was updated last year. Okay, it has some very similar hooks. Okay, use session storage, use local storage should also be there here somewhere. Use read local storage. Yeah, use local storage. There we go. Use boolean, a hook that handles boolean state to handle between, I don't know, true or false in this case, right? Uh, use event listener, use document title that sets the document title, so you can use it to change the title up here. So in React, as you know, it is a single page application normally, right? Not normally, it is a single page application. But you could have used, let's say, routing to give that idea or give a feeling that user is switching between different pages. Okay, even though all of it is a single page, we want to give user a feeling that they're switching between different pages, and on each page you want to update this title. Since there is only one index html, whatever is the title that you have set in the index html is taken as the default title. But if I switch from, let's say, session 4 to session 3, which is another tab, and user thinks, oh, it's a new page that I'm going to, I will also want to update the title. And you can use a used document title. You can build a used document title which updates it. How would you do it? Here is the code of how they are doing it. Okay, they're literally calling window.document.title and updating it to the new value. They're using useRef to have a reference of the DOM element of the title. But if there is any other way that you can think of, please do build it. Okay, I think this would be a very nice collection of hooks. Maybe well, Hacktoberfest is coming up. Maybe I could have a repository of all the useful hooks which are type safe, which throw errors, log errors, and all those. Right? I think that would be a good thing to build. Hmm, that's a good idea. Okay, any questions, anyone, before we move to the next bit? Let me just push everything that we have done so far. I need to go to my git ignore and remove this. Suggestions of building hooks. And what was the other one? Usehooks.com, right? By the way, I guess this would be a very stupid question at this point after we talked so much about hooks. But if asked in an interview, what are hooks and how do they differ from normal variables? How would you answer? While I'm pushing, I would love to see if anyone answers that. What are hooks and how do they differ from normal variables? When would you use hook and why? It is okay to be wrong, just by the way. If you're scared about being wrong. Okay. No answer, so I'll try to give my best answer. Uh, the ones that I give in interviews. So hooks are a way to capture state. So if you don't use hooks, then what you're basically writing is pure functions, and pure functions don't remember state, right? So let's say if I have a pure function of, let's say, reading from local storage, for example, then a pure function given one input, it will give the same output again and again, okay, or similar output. Uh, So variables or pure functions are not going to remember state. We use hooks when we want to remember state. We also create custom hooks when we want to use some of the React's already existing hooks. So example, if you create a function like function ABC, and inside that function you want to use a use state, it won't be allowed. You cannot use hooks inside pure functions. You have to use hooks inside other hooks or inside uh, JSX components. Okay. So custom hooks, number one, they allow you to use some of the existing hooks of React. So use state, use effect, use ref, all those will work inside another hook. Okay, are allowed to be used inside another hook. And you use hooks when you want to share some sort of logic or maybe share some sort of data. Okay, between two different components. depending on like whatever we are doing, uh, how we are using the hook. Oh, I did receive an answer. Sorry, I missed that answer. Hooks are like functions for actions. Yeah, like more or less. Uh, yeah. So that would be an answer that you could give. Like, why do we use custom hooks, or what is the need for it? So if we want to use some of React's functionalities and we want to share that logic, okay, share that logic of creating that state or updating that state with another component, which are like sibling components. In that case, we can create a hook to do that. Okay, share the logic with sibling components. Share possibly the data with sibling components. Oh, someone has asked for the schedule. There we go. It's in the chat. And this is day two, depending on where you are. Uh, my session should be ending in like what, 30 minutes approximately? And then you'll have fun type racer mini event. Anyways, coming back. So yeah, what are hooks? Why do we use it? What are custom hooks and why do we use it? Yes. Uh, okay. So no questions, anyone? Let's move on to the next bits. Uh, I guess this is something that we have already done. Okay, rendering and re-rendering of expensive child. So we are using memo to ensure that we don't re-render an expensive child. Okay. Now the next question. Okay, and this is going to be the tricky one. So here I am using react.memo, which means that it should not re-render. Hopefully, let's start from like Q13. Okay. So I have a count and set count. I have a style which sets the color red, and on ping it is a callback function, just console.log ping. Uh, Button primary, on click it updates the count variable. Okay. And I have a memoized child which takes style. Okay, that is an input which technically is not changing anywhere. Okay, and it takes this on ping, which again in the it's a function which is only doing a console log. And I am going to go here and do question 13. So I click on, so memo is child rendered. I click on +1, memo child rendered. Child, let me make that button, or maybe let me just put a class name of secondary. But why is that not? Did I put class name secondary in a button only? Ah, that's why. You. uh, Danger it is. And let me change this to, I don't know, orange, yellow. Okay, perfect. Memo child rendered. Uh, this is a memoized child already, and these things are not changing as you saw. I click on the child. Okay, it logs ping and ping. I click on the parent, memo child rendered is logged, which means we are reaching this point. Okay, question is why? Okay, why is the memoized child re-rendering again and again? If you want to look at the whole code, maybe I can toggle this to be on the right side. So this is small and Let's just go on. This is the whole question. Any guesses, anyone? Would love to see any responses in the chat. And I can move away from the screen so that you can see everything. Maybe I can just increase this and I can still be on the screen. Yep, there we go. So, no changes whatsoever in these, but still memo child keeps on rendering and re-rendering again. There is no key passed uh, for whatever reason. Okay, no, not so for whatever reason, but there's no key passed, so there's nothing that is actually changing. So why do I still see memo child rendered again and again every time parent gets rendered? Okay, uh, no guesses, anyone? Cool. Let's figure it out. So, if given such question in an interview, how are you going to approach it? Uh, the way to approach it is to understand after render, do we have same reference of the object or is the reference of the object changed? Okay, because objects is where things get a bit messy. So react.memo can only do its magic of not rendering if it knows for sure, like 100%, that it is exactly the same value. It cannot do it if we tell it, okay, I'm not sure if the value is exactly the same. Okay, it doesn't know what to do. If the value or the reference to a value changes, then it doesn't know what to do. So it will re-render by default. So react.memo on a child is like only half the optimization because the props that you're passing, if they are actually not like properly, I'd say, memoized, or if they are actually constantly changing, or if they are not stable reference, then yeah, react.memo will not be able to do its magic. Okay, so the parent component also needs to cooperate in a way for the child to actually be memoized properly. So in this case, why is that happening? So on every render, so we know for a fact that every time we click on the button, it causes a render. Now on every render, even though visually to us the code looks exactly the same, in JavaScript is going to create a new reference on every render. Okay, so it's going to say that on the previous render, the color yellow, okay, this was saved at memory location 1. After render, the same variable has is now saying that the color yellow is saved at memory location 2. Okay, and now it's like, okay, we are reading from like two different locations, so maybe the value itself has changed, even like memory location has changed, value itself has changed, and the value has changed, which means memo is not going to do its magic because value change means trigger an update, right? So we need to ensure that the same stable reference is passed to this memoized child. So we will use two of the hooks that we are available. We can use memo and say that this is going to return exactly the same value again and again, and it only needs to be calculated on first render. Okay, so that is my use memo here. And in this case, for on ping, which is a function call, I can use callback. Okay, which is basically use memo but for functions. Now I go back, reload, this rendered. I click 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is not rendering. Okay. Because step one in use, so use memo is used to memorize values. So you keep hearing this, but now I think this makes it much more clearer, right? So everyone hears, oh yeah, it memoizes value, it memoizes function, but what does that actually mean? It means exactly this. Okay. So when we memorize the value, we are saying we are providing a stable reference to that particular object. Okay. We are saying that, yep, even after something changes, this color yellow is not updating because it does not depend on any variable or any value. It is this value and this value only. Okay. So on the first rerun, on the first render, calculate it, store it, and on every other runs, you're going to be saying, like, looking at that exact same value, color set to yellow every time. So no need to change it. And this in on ping case, we're saying that yes, there is a function which returns or console logs the keyword, like the value ping. But again, on every render, it's going to log exactly the same thing. You don't need to re-render or do it again and again. Just once is enough. Okay. So even this takes in a dependency array. And in that dependency array, if you say it depends on something, let's say say that it depends on the count variable for whatever reason. Okay. So every time count changes, this will change. Okay. What if I actually, next to this, I put count as well? Every time count changes, that would be rendered again, right? So this dependency array also means that you can signify or specify based on what variables you're using inside the use callback, which uh, yeah, when to re-render. Okay, you can specify that. So if you're using count variable inside the use callback, then you can say that every time the count variable changes, I want you to re-render. But if you have like 7 or 8 other different use state variables that you're not using, then you can say, yeah, if they're not changing, don't update. And yeah, that's all about it. Any questions, anyone? Stable references and use memo, use callback, and what it does, how it works. Anything? Okay, cool. Uh, no questions. But I will point out one thing. Okay, do not over uh, use memo or use callback. Okay, use memo, use callback. These are not free. Like okay, uh, and when I say free, I mean like React has to do some work beforehand for it to ensure that uh, I don't need to update this when some variable has changed. Okay. It has to first store the previous result in memory. It has to compare the dependency array on every render. It has to run the comparison logic of did the prop change, did it not change. So example, if you're doing, let's say, addition of two numbers, do not wrap it in use memo. Okay. Because it would be easier to just let it run. Okay. So use memo would add more overhead than it would save. Always only use memo or that computation when you have a noticeably expensive operation. Example, like in the next question, I have an array where it is going to create, I don't know, 10,000 items. Uh, and this will happen every time I click on some button, for example. Okay. So that is an expensive computation. I know I'm creating it from like 0 to 10,000 or 9,999 or 1 to 10,000. Then do I really need it to be run on every render? No. So I can wrap it in use memo and yeah, do something about it. But if let's say I have to just, I don't know, add two numbers, add two strings, for example. I take my first name, my last name, merge them together and show it to the user. Should it be wrapped in use memo? Not really. Not really needed. You're adding more overhead for React to recalculate, recompute than you're saving time with using use memo. Similar for use callback, but also uh, use callback is going to cache a function definition. Okay, so it will be like, okay, there is this, where was I question, yeah, on ping function. So it's going to cache what is the definition of on ping function, what it needs to do. Okay, but if inside this dependency array you say that it depends on count, which is changing on every click, then you are not using actually use callback, you're just doing a normal uh, change. So it doesn't help memo child anyways, so don't do that. Okay, please 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 don't do that. And how much time do I have left? This is good. I think this is the perfect time to basically give you an overview of other questions that we have. Okay, other questions that I have had is about, oh, this one was about use callback. So question 15 is about use callback. Question 16 is about context. Okay. So use context, what it does, how it works, or maybe given this question, I guess the main question would be that if the theme changes, should this username, so there is this theme provider where there is a theme toggle changes it from red, like, sorry, not red, dark to light. Then should this username be re-rendered, yes or no? And if it is getting re-rendered, then how can we avoid it? Okay, that is the main question here. I should be adding that question. Would user name re-render when theme changes? If yes, how do we avoid it? If no, why? And this was, is this much, if I remember? We were not using this. Would memo child be re-rendered on every button click? And the follow-up question is, if yes, why? And how do we avoid it? If no, why? There's a question, are all events recorded somewhere? Yes, they are on the YouTube channel of Major League Hacking, including the current one that I'm actually running right now. There we go. Okay. Question 15. Typing in input should re-render reset button or skip it? Okay. 16th, 17th. Okay. What was the 17th one? Counter and counter. Oh, expensive tree. Nice. So in this one, uh, if I click on counter, question 17, click on counter, does expensive tree re-render? It's very similar to some of the previous questions that we have done, just said or shown differently. 16, no, 15, 16, 17. Okay. 18. Now we talk about request animation frame, which I don't think we have spent a lot of time on, but I also don't have too much time on it right now. So I'm going to skip it. Uh, but there is a question here. So, what is request animation frame? We kind of covered it yesterday when we were talking about there's a call stack. Okay, so JavaScript runs things in three queues. Okay, even though it's single threaded, there are three different queues to maintain things or run what run different parts of the code. So the first one is the call stack, which is immediately whatever it needs to run. Then we have the second queue, which is micro task queue. All the micro tasks need to finish before it goes to the next queue, which is called as a macro task queue. So request animation frame would also come back to like in which queue does request animation frame work, and would we see the set timeout first, or would it we see, I don't know, request animation frame first? So and what it is, okay, that's also another question. So what is a request animation frame? I guess that would be the first question that I would ask, and then I'll show this and I'll be like, okay, when will it work, and if I have a set timeout, which will be fired first? uh, yeah, so on and so forth. Then we also have a new introduction in, I think, React 18. This was introduced, use layout effect. So my question would be, what is use effect versus what is use layout effect? Use effect versus use layout effect. When to use which one? Pros and cons. Okay, so that would be possibly the next question, that next popular question I would ask. Then we have, I don't know if we touched based on it yesterday, but queue microtask. Okay. So in this case, I have so many console logs, approximately six console logs. What will be the order of logging in the console? Okay. We know that anything which is outside should get technically rendered first, okay, in the call stack. But anything that is inside the use effect, what would be the order of it? And again, we come back to like what would be micro task, what would be macro task. And finally, another one which would be exactly similar, but in this case, it is use effect versus use layout effect. What will be the order of logs in console? Which one runs first? Okay, and which one runs later, and why? So once you understand that bit, any UI that you build, you can be smart about it. Okay, like maybe if some things run with exactly when the browser repaints, then maybe you could use layout effect. Example, let's say there is some sort of cursor blinking, okay, or there is some animation which you want to look it as smooth as possible. In that case, you can wrap it in use layout effect, because use layout effect will run exactly when the browser paints something, aka when it shows something on the screen. Okay, so that's about it, I guess. And this would be the interesting one. So question 22a and question 22b. Okay, these are exactly the same implementation of a code. The only slight difference is about uh, React 18 and React 19. Okay, so React 19 is going to warn whenever you try to set state synchronously within an effect. React, it doesn't break the UI. The UI will still work. Everything will still work, but uh, there will be these kinds of warnings depending on how your ESLint is configured as well. Okay, if it is using the latest React 19. And what is this error about? Let's talk about that. So in React 19, something called as React compiler was introduced, where React already uh, optimizes your code as much as possible. which means that you can avoid writing use memo, use callback in a lot of places. Okay, it will auto memorize most of the things. React will already do that. But to auto memorize, it has built up some new rules, things that used to be a pattern. Like even if you ask AI to write code nowadays, it will use this pattern of the React 18 one, where it will try to set the result uh, inside a use effect. So in this case, what's happening? We are building a autocomplete function where there is some debounce function. We are typing something, we are using this debouncing, and we are saying that only after 300 milliseconds pass the input to the API call and get the output. Okay, so let me go to the app.tsx and show it to you. Okay, live. Question 22a. I go here and I type GHW, or let's say just G. Goes and fetches the data. Okay, H. When it could not find the data, or if there is no debounced query, let's say I only have space, 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 in that case, we want to set the results, the array of results, back as empty. Okay, so it works, perfectly works. Question 22a works. And if I do the same in question 22b, that would exactly result in the same response. So G, and I do space, 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 space. Okay, works exactly the same. The warning is saying that you're trying to do this, but you shouldn't, because effects are intended to synchronize state between React and external systems. Okay, not about internal React and its internal state. So in this case, we are using the use state hook for like setting the results back to empty. Do we really need to do that, or can you derive that value? Okay. So React is going to force from React 19 to derive values that could be like derived, rather than having a state variable to do exactly what you could have derived by just putting this out in a separate inline variable, a normal variable. So that is the difference between this and this. So query and set query, these cannot be derived. They need to come from like in user input. Debounced query depends on my use debounce hook. Fetch and set fetch, this is about the results. Okay, similar to that. And error and set error is also depending on the uh, result that is coming back. What is the main thing that I've changed is, instead of me checking this condition inside a use effect, I am checking it outside. I'm deriving it based on if debounce query dot trim. Okay, uh, like putting it in the trim query, and I'm like, if that is not equal to empty string, and it is not equal to this fetch, then we have a loading screen that will display, and will only display the results when we have received some response back and that has some data, or we'll set it to empty array. So good or best practices of React are coming in, or will be forced, depending on how you have set up your ESLint, your linter and formatter in React for React 19. Okay, so that is one thing that I wanted to stress on. Other than that, I guess you have new hooks come in. So we have a use hook, which can read promises, it can read context, it can be called inside conditionals and loops. Other Instead of like using use context, we can use use hook. There is a form action. Okay, that would be like React will handle form submission, pending state of form, error boundaries automatically. We used to use forward ref before, to pass a ref to a React component or a normal HTML component, or not HTML, JSX component. But now we can just pass ref as a prop. That's the new thing. Uh, what else we have? This use state and use effect. So use state and use effect together to set or update a value can be kind of removed, and we can use something called as use action state, which will which can have like, if it is a pending value, if there is any error, if there is any update that needs to come back, yeah, these are new things that are used, will be, not will be, have been introduced in React 19. So if you're writing React 19 code, have a look at the documentation and try to ensure that you're using the best practices possible. Okay, that's everything from me. Any questions, anyone, before we end the session? Everything has been recorded, of course, so it will be on the YouTube channel. You can have a look at it, and I'll give you a quick break. And after this, join Cecilia for a type racer mini event. So after like listening to me for what 2 hours, 4 hours actually, uh, have a quick break and enjoy a really nice game session with Cecilia. Okay. Questions show React 18 versus React 19 and git push. All the code is right here. Have a look at it. If you have any questions, post it on the Discord chat. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed it. And I'm very excited for having our own use hooks repository sometime in the near future, maybe for Hacktoberfest. Okay, cool. Thanks all. Cheers. Bye bye.